Also, when we sometimes talk about Africans in the diaspora, the people in the diaspora and the diasporan experiences differ, and the interpretations of the experiences as well. And so, for example, the Africans who may have ended up in America would have a totally different experience to the Africans who ended up in the Caribbean. And then even in the Caribbean, you have the differences of the Africans who ended up in French territory, or Dutch territory or Spanish territory versus those who ended up in British territory. And so you have, a lot of these differences that we still have to deal with amongst each other.
In the best way we can, seeing the angles and trying to approach it from wherever. Sometimes some person have to do things to it, we say, we shouldn't really annihilate them, but we have to be the type of leaders who understand how to go about doing the things in the right perspective way, so as not to even destroy ourselves or give the enemy any chance to destroy us. So those are some of the things I'm looking at, and I'm here willing to do what I can in the best way I can to make the movements work.
Yes, I give thanks, Brother Dobson. It's a journey, and I think a couple of things need to happen. We really need to be able to put our Caribbean story into perspective, because I think it is sometimes not necessarily fully understood by others. You mentioned a bit earlier in your speech that we are different groups of people went through some of the same things, and I think you probably were alluding to the fact that many of them would have had a level of slavery, domination, or being dominated by some other territory or something by at some point. However, we still have to put into perspective our story, separate and apart still from these other stories, because when you really analyze our story, a lot of the things that were inflicted upon us, we never sought to inflict on anybody else, even though, people come to our territories, or we went to other territories and dominated, so to speak. We never sought to enslave anybody or put anybody through the kind of things that they put us through. Also, when we sometimes talk about Africans in the diaspora, the people in the diaspora and the diasporan experiences differ, and the interpretations of the experiences as well. And so, for example, the Africans who may have ended up in America would have a totally different experience to the Africans who ended up in the Caribbean. And then even in the Caribbean, you have the differences of the Africans who ended up in French territory, or Dutch territory or Spanish territory versus those who ended up in British territory. And so you have a lot of these differences that we still have to deal with amongst each other, and that in itself sometimes complicates us seeking to even unite from the Caribbean front. Then you have the fact that everything. Well, I speak to those from the British-speaking territory because, as you realize, I speak English fluently. Don't even know an African language. Anyway, but in our case, everything also was stripped. The language, your spiritual practices, anything to do with, connecting you being connected to Africa was taken away, and taken away from your great grandparents. So by the time whatever it is got to you, it would have been so far removed. So even if any little thing, were held in, maybe your grandparents held on to something, or your great grandparents held on to something, by the time that got to you have nothing. And that's why up to this point, many of us in the Caribbean, unless we, make that conscious effort to go to learn an African language, we don't know an African language. However, in our school systems, our education system, they seek to make sure that they teach Spanish and French, and they are now even seeking to introduce Mandarin, based on what is going on the global scale. And all of this is also as a part of the efforts of psychological enslavement. We cannot sometimes overlook the effects of that. And I think sometimes in our discourse and discussions, as I realize sometimes as I talk to different Africans who are, whether in the diaspora, those who maybe were born in Africa and, relocate to another place in the diaspora, or those who are just in Africa, it's just for them to be able to sort of put the Caribbean experience into perspective. Because sometimes they say, oh, y'all are so divided and y'all are so this and, but if you don't really understand the struggle and the history, then you like Marcus Garvey said, a people without a knowledge of their past is like into a tree without roots. So you really don't, and that's where I guess a lot of us in the Caribbean are, because a lot of us don't know the true knowledge of our past history and culture, and that's why a lot of us function like we're tree without roots. So it is really a struggle for us to get that message across to our African brothers and sisters, and also we too, because I guess I can't say that also without really blaming ourselves to some extent. No, some of us will have awakened and know that that is a journey that we should be on. You could argue that some more of us should be together. Go ahead.
Give me a little touch. Yeah. I'm glad you said that, because one of the things what happening is yes, we can get up and blame persons for some of the system what happen where we are. But if we get up and just do the don't take a self-introspection within ourselves and see where we ourselves are dropping the button. Because the China man, you see what China they know? China start them recovery about in the 60s. I take China no time for the world power stage within the world at this moment. By getting rid of the Uncle Chinese them and getting rid of and start move themselves. They might move from certain time, but we look for
tell. The Bluetooth device is connected successfully.
As a people, so sometimes we look back on some of them things that much. What has been done, yes, we have to make sure that we keep it in mind, that we know where we're coming from. But what can we do presently to alleviate that? As I said, I look for introduce Mandarin. Why is it that we ourselves are not trying our best to get 2 or 3 of our language from our continent and begin using whether it be social media, whichever ways and means to begin teaching our people. They begin opening up preach basic schools and begin teaching these things from there in some of these places.
Please, I want to. Hello, brethren. Good evening. The time right here in Nigeria, the western coast of Africa, is 6:25 p.m. My name is Chukwuemeka. But you can call me Emeka for short. Chukwuemeka is an Igbo name. I'm an Igbo man from the eastern part of Nigeria. I represent the Igbo race. I am also a chief and also a cabinet member of the ancient Idueri kingdom in Aguleri, present day Aguleri. I have to make this introduction to let you all know that I am coming from a place of culture. I'm coming from a place of deep roots. I'm coming from that place that most of you all in the Caribbean can actually trace the hidden answers that you all seek. I'm coming from that root, and I have informations, I have deep knowledge that can really set us all free from what you were never taught. Because like my brother said here, the educational system after during the slave trade was meant to disrupt your history. But then I will take you all to Jacksonville. I asked you the other time that we had a meeting that you should check it up in unity. So we seek to connect from here, from the homeland, from the motherland. We seek to connect. My brother Sterret Dobson, you are in Jamaica, right?
Yes,
okay.
I am in Jamaica.
We will begin to understand why the traditional worship were banned and totally obliterated from your history. We will begin to understand that. Okay, before I proceed, I will tell you we are cultural people, we are spiritual people too. We have 4 days in a week. We have our own civilization. We have our writing, which is Nsibidi. But all these things was destroyed. It was destroyed. Nsibidi, just like you have the Chinaman writing in his Mandarin or whichever. You have the Japanese writing. You have the Arabic. You have the Arabic inscriptions. We have our own as Igbo people. We call Nsibidi every word carved. But this whole civilization was destroyed. Our spirituality was attacked. It was destroyed. We were shamed, our people. But this is a story for another day. But as we continue having this meeting to connect the people through Acho Nwanne'm. Acho Nwanne'm simply means I'm looking for my brethren. I'm looking for my brothers. And that is where Unify Igbos now has done great. We will unify ourselves. You will understand what you have been missing all these years. But I will leave the floor for question. I'll be here, though I'm driving, but I'll still have time for this. Thank you.